welcome to the third edition of West Springfield Rotary's West Side Legacy Stories. I am Hayden Kostansky, and I am here with Augusto Asinas. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
All right. So, could you tell me your name and birth date, by the way?
My name?
Yeah, and your birth date.
Well, my name is Augusto G. Asinas, and here my family calls me Gus, whereas in the Philippines I was called Totong, Totong. That was my nickname when I was growing up. But my siblings never called me by that name. They always called me Manong, meaning the oldest. Is the respect for the name.
What is your birthday, by the way, too?
Oh, my birthday is May 28, 1934.
Very interesting. So how long have you been living in West Side, by the way?
I've been here. I moved to the West Side after I married my wife, Joan, in 1967. So that's approximately 48 years since I've been here.
Very interesting. What changes in town have you noticed since you've been living here?
When I first came into West Springfield, I didn't know what it is all about, but it was nice, quiet town. And I was told that it was a Republican town at that time. I happened to know the selectmen at that time. When I first moved here, they were mostly Republicans. And the Democrats were a minority at that time, I guess.
Do you miss the old ways of living here?
Well, not really, just progressed. I was so busy with my profession, with my practice, that I never knew the difference. It just went along with the progress of time.
What is it that brought you to West Side, by the way, too? What brought you to West Side, by the way?
Well, after I went into practice, I built my house at Forest Glen. It was a big house at Forest Glen, 193 Forest Glen. It was built in 1970.
Ah, good.
So I was living there since 1970 and moved out when I retired.
What was it like growing up here, by the way, in West Springfield?
Well, I was really a grown man when I came, so I wasn't really growing up. I was already a professional when I moved to West Springfield.
Okay. Do you have any like really good memories of the old days or anything?
Well, when I first came into town and moving into Forest Glen, I remember there was a beautiful farm, the Galaska farm on the right side. When I go to my office in Holyoke, there was a beautiful place of 50 acres. As a matter of fact, you could see in early morning when I get up to go to work at 7 o'clock, the haze, beautiful haze in the morning in that farm over the apple orchards before it was built into houses. I kind of miss that, the farmlands here in West Springfield.
Have you ever been told any sort of legends about this town as well too? Oh yeah, what about the people of West Side? How have they been, by the way? Any new people you've met while here?
Well, when I was working as an intern in 1958 at the Mercy Hospital, there were a lot of doctors that were living here in West Springfield that used to go to Mercy. There were, I could name a few. There was Dr. Charlie Diamond. There was Dr. Moore, uh, um, Dr. Hoffman, Dr. Cyril Shea Jr., to name a few.
Mm.
And mostly my association was with the doctors.
Mm. Oh, sorry. um, so, what can you tell me about your childhood now? So we've kind of gone through you know, the West Side you. So let's hear about you from the Philippines.
Well, it was I when the war broke out, I was 7 years old, and I do recall when they said that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and also bombed the air bases around Manila. And I was in school, grade one, and there was a commotion because they were told the Japanese are coming. So we ran home, and when I ran home, my mother was crying, praying the rosary, and we had to evacuate into the mountains. And I do recall traveling by the river with big mountains, and it was just, I wasn't fearful or anything. It was just fun for me as a young man, as a young boy, traveling in this outrigger. We call it banca, Banca, for miles and miles to hide in a village way in the mountain. And after the Japanese came over, my father is a doctor. So we went back to our town. And at that time, the hospital that was run by my father was divided into two, one run by the Japanese, and the other half run by my father.
Oh.
And I was, one time, I didn't see my father for several days. The Japanese took him. And and the Japanese at that time was famous that when they took somebody, you'll never see them again. They're either beheaded or killed or whatever.
Oh.
However, my father was lucky. He was friend of the other Japanese who was running the hospital, was a captain. Happens to be this Japanese captain was educated in the United States and what speaks English with my father, and they used to play tennis. And I was a tennis boy.
Oh.
I picked up the ball for them. And after the game, the Japanese captain liked me that he ordered me with so-called Japanese cigarette called akibuno.
Oh.
And I didn't smoke. So what did I do with the cigarette? I sold them for some money. And
Oh.
that was okay with me, you know. And at that time, being under the Japanese, I had to go to school. We were required to continue schooling. So I went to school from grade 1 to grade 5 when MacArthur came. We were lucky that General MacArthur came over near our area. He landed in Leyte and we were in Samar. And I could definitely remember when he came over after the war because the skies was riddled with planes all over. And the next thing you know was the bombardment. All I could hear was the bombardment.
Oh.
And the Japanese flying over. I'm sorry, the American planes were coming over
Yeah.
and liberated us first. We were lucky to be liberated first during the Second World War.
Hmm. Um, did you ever like have to like bow to the Chinese or the Japanese
Did
there?
I?
Like how did you have to treat them?
Oh, we were required to bow to every Japanese we see. We have to bow. If you don't bow, you either get slapped or punished. So we had to do that.
Mm. I'm terribly sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's the way, it was at that time.
Mm. Um, did you have any sort of siblings at all in your family?
Yes, we have four children, two girls and two boys. They were all born here in West Springfield, and they grew up in West Springfield.
Hmm. Uh, did they uh, how was it growing up with them? Were they a pain or they you know
No, they were well. They always knew that we we give them discipline. They were always respectful of us, and they grew up. We went to church. We vacationed together. We did a lot every year. I would vacation back to the Philippines because at that time my father was still living, and they enjoyed going back to the Philippines with me and travel through Hawaii or through Hong Kong. And we always vacation together, and we also enjoyed skiing together.
hmm, sounds really nice.
Yeah,
Do
and
you
yes,
did you see him
and
often?
yeah.
Did you see him often and stuff?
Oh yes, they're all most of them professional except for the youngest one,
Uh,
and they all have their own families. And I have seven grandchildren.
oh, and just to confirm, you had how many siblings, by the way?
I had four children and seven grandchildren.
Oh no, siblings, like
Oh,
brothers
my
and
siblings?
sisters. Yeah, siblings.
Oh, my siblings is were seven of us.
Hmm.
It's too bad that my mother died. I was very sad at the early age. I was only 15 years old when she died.
Oh,
I was in pre-med at that time. It was a sad time in my. It was a sad time for me.
oh, I'm so sorry. I I kind of experienced something like that before in my
Yeah,
life too. With I mean I haven't really lost someone like a sibling or anything, but family it's tough.
yeah.
It is.
Out of that seven of us, there were five boys and two girls, and two of them are here in the United States. My sister is in Florida. She's now a widow, married to a doctor. And my youngest brother, I'm 16 years older than him. He's here in West Springfield. He's an engineer,
Oh,
and he lives in West Springfield.
mm, very great. It's they're doing well too. They're like how are they doing business wise?
Yeah, he's married but no children.
Oh, okay. All right.
He lives in West Springfield. Yeah.
All right. All right. So moving on. Uh, friends. So did you did you have many friends growing up as well too? Anyone in particular?
Well, when I was growing up in the Philippines, the town where I grew up was by the sea, next to the sea. It was Catbalogan, Samar was the capital. My father being the chief of the provincial hospital, we lived in that town until I came to the United States. So I was there until I was 24, and I came here in 1958.
All right. So how is it that you met your spouse?
Well, I met her when I was an intern at the Providence Hospital, and she was just a freshly graduated from high school in West Springfield. She's a graduate of West Springfield High School, and she worked in the operating room, and that's how we met. I was an intern, and since then, we kind of uh, uh, We were together for 6 years before we got married. I mean, we dated for 6 years. But she went after being a surgical technician at the uh, Providence Hospital. She went to School of Nursing at, in Miami, Florida, the Jackson Memorial Hospital, as uh, as a nurse. While I proceeded to my training to Boston. And I finished my training at the New England Medical Center in Boston, and we got married in 1964. And she came to work with us in Boston, and she was working at the Brigham Memorial Hospital uh, while I was at the New England Medical Center doing my residency in neurosurgery. And we got married in 1964. And then after I finished in 1966, we came back to West Springfield. But being a foreign graduate and, in non-immigrant visa, I had to wait to change my visa to become an immigrant so that I could practice around here. And luckily, I became an immigrant and took the examination, the state board. You have to take the state board examination because I'm a foreign graduate to be able to practice in Massachusetts. Luckily, I passed it at one time. And I came back to West Springfield, or I came to West Springfield with Joan in 1967 and started practice. And while I was starting my practice, the Vietnam War broke out.
Oh.
President Johnson was recruiting everybody.
Oh.
So they recruited me to go to Vietnam. Luckily, when they examined me in Westover, the doctor there examining me had a back problem.
Oh.
And I, being a neurosurgeon, instead of him examining me, he was asking me questions about himself
Oh.
because his back problem. So I had to give him my neurosurgical advice. And at the end of the interview, he mentioned to me that, Dr. Asinas, you really don't want to go to Vietnam. So, well, I just started practice. Well, would you like me to just defer you? Says, I would like that if I'm eligible. But I have a history of back problem also,
Oh.
which was recorded.
Oh.
So he was able to manage and deferred me from going to Vietnam. And that's why I continued to practice neurosurgery in the area.
Oh. Wow, interesting. And just to clarify, you had how many children you said?
4,
Four? Okay.
2 girls and 2 boys.
2 girls, 2 boys. Wow, nice. What were they like?
Hmm?
What were they like?
Well, they were good kids. The oldest girl is a lawyer,
Oh, wow.
married. They are in Boston. They are in Needham, and she has a very good job. My second daughter, she is the vice president high-end in Cambridge with a big company.
Whoa.
And she is a CPA. My other son, he lives in Long Meadow. He is a director of a behavioral unit in Connecticut, counseling kids, problems. And my other son is married to a doctor they are in Maine.
Oh. Man, that's fantastic. They're doing great. That's great. And okay. And was there any memorable family stories that you can recall?
Hmm?
Any memorable family stories that you remember?
Well, my own family, or
Yeah, just your own your family. Yeah.
well, the my memorable story was that when I start to when I was working at the Mercy Hospital, as at that time the nuns were mostly Irish sisters of Providence, and you could only see their face this much. And I never saw snow. I never had snow in the Philippines. So the first day of snow, the nuns called me, said, "Dr. Asinas, go outside. It's snowing." So I went outside, and first time in my life to see snow on the ground, and it was fascinating.
Oh.
And the nuns were all the nuns also liked me, and they said, "Doctor, you're but you're Irish of the East."
Oh.
I said, "Irish of the East?" I said, "Well, aren't you Catholic, the only Catholic in the Far East? We're the only Catholic nation in the Far East. This is the Philippines."
Uh, that's
And and then I got to meet Bishop Wilden and became very good friends with him. So when I came back to practice as a neurosurgeon, I was welcome very much that they needed me, so that I was my practice just blossomed in the area, because I was a consultant to almost all the hospital in the Pioneer Valley,
um,
and so it was a good practice that I had there. I was lucky to stay around.
mm, indeed, indeed. And you mentioned you had a nickname, by the way. Is that correct?
Well, that is my family nickname.
Oh, okay. And what was that? Just to clarify.
I mentioned Totong, Manong. They always call it Manong Toto. I was named after my uncle
Oh,
who fell off a horse in the farm and died. So I was named after him with that nickname
oh.
by my grand aunts.
Right. So what is it that you do for fun?
Hmm?
What is it that you like to do for fun?
I'm sorry.
What do you like to do for fun?
Hmm?
What do you like to do for fun?
Do I what?
Like, what do you like to do for fun? Like hobbies and stuff in your
Oh,
free time.
well, I have several hobbies. As I mentioned, I never saw snow before, and I have to learn how to ski. I started skiing here at Holyoke, Mount Holyoke, and I had difficulty. I was only 30 years old to start skiing, but I did. And also, when the children were growing up, I had to teach them how to ski. So we're a skiing family who skied together and have fun. Uh, that's one of my hobbies. And then the other hobby was golfing. I started golfing, and then but I also played tennis. And now that I'm retired, I did all kinds of needlepoint, artistic needlepoints. I have so many of them that they were distributed among the children and the grandchildren. And now my wife taught me how to do knitting. So I had to knit blankets, sweaters for the grandchildren, and hats.
Oh, very lovely.
So to keep me busy in my retirement.
Um, would any of your how would any of your classmates remember you?
Hmm?
Like like any of your classmates remember you at all, or have you seen them,
Well,
or like how
um,
would they?
well, a lot of our classmates came to the United States and migrated, and so we have a yearly reunion. And graduated in 57. It's now almost 60, 60 years
Mm,
that
wow.
we've been doing reunion, and some of them are dead, unfortunately. Um, some are still around. Yeah.
How would your friends describe you as well too?
Well, they always look upon me because I did very well in school. I was always the top 10
Oh,
student, and we're just lucky.
oh,
My mother was very bright. She was graduated salutatorian in high school, and my sisters, there's brightness in the family.
yeah. Um, did you have any really fun memories of being in school?
Well, it was always studying. You have to study to always pass. Luckily that I was very good at my grades, that it was always an excitement at the finals, because you have to say the following doesn't have to take the final exam because of my grades. It was always A. I was an A student, so they will say, Augusto Asinas, you don't have to take the exam. You already got a 90 or 95. So that was always exciting in schooling.
Hmm.
But it was hard studying, hard work studying day and night to make those grades. You cannot just fall around. You have to really. Luckily, I have good memory.
Uh, that's
Even now
fantastic.
at 84, I still have good memory.
Um, did you have any time for playing sports at all?
I played sports.
Yeah, yeah.
I said just skiing,
Just
tennis, and I tried golfing. I wasn't good at golfing. I don't know why.
oh,
And then I stopped skiing after I fell and broke my shoulder. Uh, so now just retired.
um, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I really didn't want to be a doctor, but my father being a doctor, the way we were brought up, the Spanish way, whatever your father wants, you say yes, father. You do not say no, father.
Oh,
My father being a doctor, he says to me, you will be a doctor. I said, yes, father.
hmm,
You're not allowed to say no.
hmm.
That's the way we were brought up. Very strict discipline family.
Did did you want to be like something else besides
Oh,
a
I
doctor?
just wanted to have a 4-year course,
Oh, okay.
uh, because in high school, I was in retail merchandising, they call it. And I wanted to be a businessman or be a banker, not a
Oh,
doctor.
oh,
But it was my father's wish that I become a doctor because he is a doctor.
oh,
I became, so I, after I became a doctor or came to the United States, I was determined to be better than him. He was a general surgeon.
oh,
So I said, I want to be better than him. So I became a neurosurgeon. I went up to the top, to the head, to become a brain surgeon.
oh. And that's how is that working for you, by the way?
You know, it was hard, busy work. My family always complained that, hey, Dad, you're never around, because I was always called for emergencies, day and night. Everybody is wrecking their cars. And the next thing you know, I get a call from the emergency room. Doctor Asinas, we want you in the emergency room. Why? There is a car accident, head injuries.
Oh,
So I did a lot of those. And since I was a consultant to all the hospitals at that time, I was so busy going as far as Coley Dickinson Hospital in Northampton, Noble Hospital in Westfield, and the Memorial Hospital in Wing Memorial Hospital in Palmer, and in the hospitals around here, Mercy, Providence. At that time, there was the other hospital before it became with with Springfield. It was to be Springfield Hospital, Mercy, and Western Memorial Hospital, and Providence Hospital. So all those hospitals I went to. I was a consultant.
So what about your summers with patients?
Hmm?
What about your summers with patients? How did those go?
My summers?
Yeah,
Well,
with patients.
I have a partner, so I can go vacation for the summertime. And we used to vacation down to Hawaii. We have a place in St. Martin, share timeshare, and the children enjoy that going to the summertime. But we always went to Cape Cod, also for the summertime, until um, finally I said, instead of going to the Cape, why don't I put a swimming pool in my house
Oh,
instead of going to the to the Cape? So we ended up stop not going to the Cape, just staying around, you know, and they enjoyed the swimming pool of the house, the big house.
that's great. So speaking of swimming pools, how many calls have you gotten about like with like that or emergency calls that had to do with people in swimming pools?
Well, I was very anxious with the swimming pool. Being a neurosurgeon, every summer I always see somebody with a broken neck. I'm paralyzed every summer, and I was very careful for my children in the swimming pool. I was always yell at them to be not diving in the shallow end because that's where it happens. And every year I had so many of those kids, the young kids with broken neck from diving in swimming pools or up in the uh, I forgot the name of the place
It's
where they have
the gorge, right?
their they dive on the rocks there.
Oh, it's a gorge. That's what it is.
Yeah, near Northampton somewhere there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The gorge.
There
They
you
used to dive there, and it's many accidents that I have treated these patients.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you still working at all now that you've
Not
retired?
anymore. I'm retired. I'm
Oh,
84 now.
okay.
And the reason I stopped working is because uh, I have I don't see I have macular degeneration in my left eye now,
Oh.
so I have difficulty looking at the
Hmm.
microscope and doing microscopic surgery. I was very instrumental in bringing microsurgery in the area. In 1970, nobody was using a microscope. I was the first one to introduce the microscopic surgery in the area,
Oh.
and everybody was saying, "Oh, Doctor Asinas, why do you want a microscope?" I said, "So I can see 1,000-fold."
Exactly. There you go.
And it was essential to doing good brain and spinal surgery with the microscope,
Oh.
and I was very successful with it.
Oh, nice. Um, so what type of jobs did you have besides just like in surgery? Like what did you have to perform on?
I didn't have any other job really. I was I was confined to my practice, and if I'm not doing my practice, I was relaxing with the family.
Oh, and so what were your some of your job accomplishments as well? Like greatest ones, your best.
Well, I was elected president of the Hamden District Medical Society
Oh,
for a couple of years, and I was elected president of the medical staff at the Providence Hospital. That also kept me busy for a couple of years. I'm a corporator of the bank in People's Bank in Holyoke, which I attended yearly for several years, and you have to retire at age 70.
oh,
And I was involved with the Catholic hierarchy. I'm a papal knight. I'm a grand knight of the papal order, Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. So where my wife and I are members, Cecil, you know, with the Catholic hierarchy. And we had a local society of neurosurgeons, the Philippine Surgeons of America. I was past president with that. And also there was a Filipino New England Medical Society. I was past president also of that. So I was involved with so many society. And being a member of the Mass Medical and the Hamden District Medical Society, I was recently awarded 50-year for membership, continuous membership, 50 years. And I received a trophy and a gold pen. I guess that's about it that I could remember. And I'm a member of Rotary for many years.
could you expand on that about your Rotaries?
I'm sorry.
So what about your experiences of the Rotaries
You know,
or your Rotary Club? Sorry, like what were those like?
Rotary Club.
Yeah, well, how was that like?
Yeah. Well, you have to go. You have to be a member. You have to go every week for meetings. You know, at that time it was required that you go every week to the meetings. But now, because I'm senior, I don't have to. It's not a requirement now. And I remember they were all male members at that time. There were no female members.
Oh,
I believe the the female membership was voted in either in late 80s or 90s, and we were all, and some of the Rotarians who were the old Rotarians who were not in favor of it. The young ones, we were all in favor. So now there are members, they're very actively members of Rotary.
okay. Very interesting. Uh, what led you to the jobs that you held?
Well,
What led you to the jobs that you held?
what length did I?
Like what led you to the jobs? Like what like the Rotary clubs? Like what led you to that?
I'm sorry,
What led you to the to like going into the
Rotary.
yeah.
Oh, it was the president of the Providence Hospital enticed me to be a member. I said, I'm too busy. I said, oh, please come, be a member of Rotary. So I became a member of the Holyoke Rotary Club
Oh.
in I think it was in the 70s or 80s. Yeah. That's
Mm.
how I got into the Rotary Club.
Oh wow.
And it was good to be a member because whenever I go visiting anywhere, like if I go back to the Philippines, I go to the Rotary Club. The Rotary Club membership that I go to, we're always the high profile people, the people with money, other generals and all that. When I went back there, so I enjoyed going to the Rotary Club in the Philippines.
That's very very good. So what about What about your like distant relatives?
Hmm?
Could you talk to us about your distant relatives at all? If you
What?
like distant relatives at all? Do you have any?
Relatives?
No, like any of your like were you related to the president or anything or
Did I what? I'm sorry.
wait, sorry, I
I
missed
cannot hear properly.
okay. So you were related to the president of the Philippines, correct?
Oh yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Uh, by marriage.
Oh, by marriage.
Yeah. Uh, the president, Mrs. Aquino, Benigno, the husband Benigno Aquino, they were exiled by Marcos, and they were living in Boston.
Yeah.
My aunt would come and visit me, and she would say, "Let's go see Mrs. Aquino, Corey, and Ninoy Aquino in Boston." So we used to go and visit him down there before she went back and became president when Marcos was out of office. Mrs. Marcos and Mrs. Aquino became president,
Oh.
Corey. So she is related to me by marriage.
Oh, all right.
My cousin is the first cousin to her. So every time I go back, I would stay with the Sumolongs, which are the Sumolongs are considered like the old money, the largest of Massachusetts.
Oh.
They belong to the old money down there. And so I would stay with them, and they always welcome me as their relative.
Oh.
And and the children enjoyed it
Oh. Oh, they did?
because they have big houses with all kinds of maids
Oh.
and help it, you know.
Um, have you learned any sort of lessons throughout your career or anything?
Lessons in what?
Like life lessons, you know.
Life lessons?
Yeah.
Well, my job as a neurosurgeon is life learning lesson. It gives me pleasure to relieve somebody of their pain.
Oh.
If somebody is in a lot of pain, comes crawling to my office and wants to commit suicide because of the pain,
Mhm.
and I said, "No, I can help you." And I do. And when they come back to the office walking, they'll give me a hug and thank me.
Oh.
And it's very gratifying, you know, job to see somebody walk again and be free of pain, or remove a big tumor in the brain, or a ruptured aneurysm that almost dead, brought to the hospital
Oh.
and come home alive. And gives me big pleasure that I have done a good job in giving this person a new life.
Oh.
Until now, if I go to some place like Home Depot or any of the big places, somebody will approach me and says, "Doc, do you remember me?" "No, what's your name?" "Remember the scar in my head? I was 20 years old when you did my surgery, and here I am alive."
Oh.
Or some woman in would embrace me out there, and my wife would be say, "Who is that?" "Well, she's a patient of mine that I did surgery in the neck."
Oh.
And she will be amazed how these people are very thankful that I have helped them. And that is very gratifying as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really sweet. That's very.
And that's why it's not because you're making money. No, it's because you help somebody. You've given this person a new life, a life that is better than before. Some of them were policemen, state policemen, who were in accidents that I took care of, and they were all knew who I was. when I was in practice.
Oh,
Even I remember I was introduced to Senator Kennedy by Mr. Dowd from West Springfield. He said, "Doctor, I'll introduce you to the senator." I said, "Sure." So I shook the hands of the senator, and the senator said, "I know, doctor." I said, "How do you know me?" "Well, from people. They talk about you." Which, again, that's very nice. And, I know all the Congressman Neil same way. And when I tried to uh, work on the visa of my brother, approached Congressman Neil, and I said, Congressman Neil says to me, "Doctor, if everybody's like you, I don't mind helping you get a visa."
um, so and if you could do anything now, what would that be, and why?
I would do the same thing.
Oh,
I like to save lives. I like to. I still dream of doing those big surgeries.
oh,
I don't mind doing it. I, I I enjoyed it. At first, it was difficult because it's hard work. You need skill and talent to be able to do the specialty of opening the brain and doing the work that you wanted to do.
do you recall your family being affected by the Great Depression at all?
I was really too young to appreciate depreciation because I was born in 1934. So I don't know what depreciation was all about. And I was born to a family that is, I wouldn't say well to do, but they were well off, being my father being a professional, being a doctor. So we were okay.
Okay. So what about World War II? How did that affect you personally?
Well, as I mentioned before, the World War II affected me badly because we were under the Japanese rule, and we have to go by the Japanese, what they want us to do. We're required to bow to every Japanese. Uh, we have to go for rationing, for food, or for bread. I have to follow a line. I didn't want my mother to follow a line. I had to follow a line to get the bread or food for the family. Although I was only about uh, 8, 9 years old at that time, 10. And I also learned how to cook and go to the market and buy food for the family. So early in life, I learned the hard way to make a living. And, uh, and we had to evacuate several times because, number one, the Japanese were coming, the Japanese were leaving, and then MacArthur was coming. So 3 times we had to evacuate. And there was an occasion which I cannot forget. We were living in the doctor's cottage way away from town, near the mountain, near the hospital. So we're separated from the population. And the town was burned, was completely burned. It was like the burning of Rome. And I'll never forget that.
Oh,
It was very traumatic for me.
oh,
And also, when I was growing up at that time, there were so many typhoons, like hurricane here. I experienced that every year. I could count to you the roof that was being flown away, the trees that were coming down. But being a young boy and my brother, we used to enjoy it because there's no school.
yeah. Was any of this during the 50s at all too?
Hmm?
Was this during the 1950s or anything?
Uh, That should have been in no. That should have been in the 40s.
Oh, okay. And then, how about the 50s then? How were the 50s like for you?
In the 50s, I was already in medical school.
Oh, okay.
So that was the Korean War, 1950,
Oh, okay.
and I was in ROTC, and we had to bid goodbye to a group of companies to go to Korean War, because the Philippines sent a company, I believe, to Korea at that time, 1950. I was first year pre-med, and I had to do ROTC for 2 years.
Yeah. What about things like the 60s, like Martin Luther King or the Civil Rights Movement?
Well, I came here in 1958.
Oh, okay. All right.
So since 58, I've been here in first here in Mercy Hospital and Providence Hospital. And then in the 60s, for 2 years, I was in Worcester City Hospital as a surgical resident. And that's where I learned uh, from a neurosurgeon what it was all about. And at that time, the mortality rate of neurosurgery was so high. And that impressed me so much that how come they are not able to do a better job? They should be able to do a better job, I thought myself.
Yeah.
But I was just a resident.
Oh,
Um, I could not voice myself and tell them what to do because they were the surgeons.
oh, of course. Yeah.
But most of the cases were very high morbidity. So I wanted to become a plastic surgeon. So I was accepted in several hospitals. But the neurosurgeon liked me so much, he says, Gus, you need to become a neurosurgeon. I looked it up, and at that time, in the uh, that was in the early 60s, there were only 1,000 neurosurgeons in the United States. So I said, So I went for an interview in Boston, and they accepted me just like that. They said, oh, we want you to be one of us, Gus. So I ended up at the New England Medical Center, and my professor was from Harvard, Dr. Silverstone. And that's how I ended to become a neurosurgeon.
Oh. And also, what about things from like the 1970s? How did that affect you personally?
Well, 1970, I was already in practice here.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, there was a problem with the President Nixon, I believe. And I was interested to know what Watergate was all about, because it was affecting the public in general, and everybody was tuned in to the television about what's going on in Washington, and we were happy to see that Ford became president after Nixon.
Um, is there anything else about like recent decades, like the bombing of the Twin Towers as well too?
Hmm?
Like anything about like recent events or more recent events like the bombing of the Twin Towers or anything?
Oh yeah, I do recall that 9/11. I'll never forget 9/11 because it's my wife's birthday. It's
Oh,
9/11.
mm,
And I do recall I was doing a procedure at the Mercy Hospital when the nurse says to me, Doctor, look in the television. There's a plane hitting the World Trade Center. I said, no, they're not. They are. I said, it is a suicide bomber. There was two of them, and that was very traumatic. and at that time it was her birthday, and we had planned to go out with our best friend to Northampton for her birthday. And at that time I just gotten her a new car, a new Mercedes, and she didn't even wanted to go out or pick up the car because it was just so traumatic at that time.
It's speaking of family. How did how did like the time between your family, and your job get affected by these things?
Well, it was very important that I was home for dinner with the family. So I instructed my secretary, my medical secretary at the office, that I have to leave the office at 5 o'clock to go home to be with the family for dinner. And I would come home for dinner with the family. However, the children were not very happy because they would say, Dad, Dad, we are here. My mind was in the hospital because I have very sick patients in the ICU whom I done brain surgery and needed me. So my mind was not at home most of the time. So I would say, oh, excuse me, because my mind was because of I have a very sick patient in the hospital. And then the children did understand, but it was always family time for dinner. I made sure of that.
And this was a general rule that you and your family had.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And if it was, if it was like an emergency, it would probably be a lot more different
Oh,
too.
I was called any time of the day, any time of the night. Sometimes I've had no sleep because I would be in the operating room doing brain surgery for uh, head injuries, and that is very common. Not a week go by without somebody being drunk and having a car accident.
So while you were in Boston, did you have any sort of ties with the political people in Massachusetts at all?
I I have no ties with them politically because I'm not a political person. However, I do admire people who are doing well uh, in the Commonwealth. I happen to know Mitt Romney. He would come here for meetings and be our speaker. And when I was talking to him, he asked my opinion that his wife had multiple sclerosis. But I, being a neurosurgeon, I really don't take care of multiple sclerosis. However, I do see patients with multiple sclerosis that are crippled, that some of them are crippled and spastic, that I have to do some surgery to release the spasticities.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. So, who do you think of as the most important person in your life?
Hmm?
Who was the most important person in your life?
Well, the most important person is my family.
Mm.
They always come first.
Who?
I made sure that the children have their education,
Okay.
and of course, being brought up Catholic, I always like to go to church and not forget Sunday. Sometimes I feel, I'm so busy that I don't go. But I was brought up by my mother, who was very religious. And throughout my education, there was always religion. So therefore, I'll never forget a teacher telling me, don't forget that you are a Christian and a Catholic at that, and that if you go to church and take communion first Friday for 7 times, that you will never die in mortal sin. which I did to fulfill that obligation. uh, I graduated medical school at the Catholic University of St. Thomas in Manila, Philippines. So that's why I had all those Catholic education before I came here.
What was the happiest moment of your life, by the way?
Well, the happiest moment of my life is my family when we had our children. Every time they're born, we're very happy because they were wanted.
Oh, yeah,
All those 4 kids were all wanted. They were not unwanted. Yeah.
exactly. Um, like, what about proudest moments of your life? What about like the proudest moments of your life as well too?
What?
The proudest, like, like in your career, like, is there any like very like proud moments of yourself that you thought was great to remember?
Well, you always want your children to be happy, and there are times when things occur in their family that will make you unhappy, which I have accepted. I have no remorse about that, but it does affect yourself
Um,
when
what
there's
about?
family problems.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. What about like life lessons?
Hmm?
What about the life lessons they've learned throughout the years?
Do what?
What about life lessons they've learned throughout the whole years?
Life lessons?
Yeah.
Well, the life lessons that I learned throughout my life and in my career, that number one, in your work, that you have to do good. Always in my 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 work, I tell my patients they come first, that I want them to get better. I always tell them that I am not the one that give them life. I said, the force is with you. I help you to get better. But to heal your problem, you have to work on it, because the guiding principle or the power is within yourself to heal your problems or your uh, disease. I'm only here to help you.
Oh,
I'm not God that gave you life. I help you to get better, but you will do the things to make yourself better. That's very foremost in every patient that I take care of. I tell them.
wow, that's very, it's
It's
very
very important.
yeah, exactly. All
Now,
right.
I'm very skillful, yes,
Yeah,
but the power, as the Star Wars said, the force is within you.
exactly. Absolutely. Um, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I'm just hoping that there will be civility with our politicians. I just hope that it could get along in Washington for America to be great. I was hoping that there will be some unity of some kind, that forget about our differences. We should work together for a common good, and that's what I would like to see.
And just to wrap things up, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I just like to be remembered as somebody in the community who had helped people get better in their life, especially those who have been suffering.
Hmm. All right. Well, that just about does it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
It's great to have
You
talked with you.
don't be you know be at ease when you interview somebody.
Thank you.
Just remember what I told you.
All right, and thank you very much for
Just
being.
think of the good things.
Yeah,
You will
exactly.
be okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, this is Hayden Kostansky signing off from West Side Legacies Stories.